Welcome to another deck tech video here on Kitchen Meta. Today I'm presenting the first character deck of the deck tech series. Not necessarily because this is the most powerful character deck, it could be, but because this one has sentimental value to me. It's one I've been iterating on for a long time since I started getting some Harry Potter cards, and I'm a really big fan of the deck. So character decks are characterized by playing Ron Weasley as their starting character. And what he says is whenever you play a character card, you use up one action to play it instead of two. So this makes a really big impact on how good it is to play characters. Playing characters for two actions usually feels like it's just taking up way too much time. And there are cards in the game like Dobby's Disappearance that are commonly played that can easily get rid of a card in play, and then you feel like an idiot for spending two actions on putting it into play. But with Ron Weasley, it's easily worth to play a lot of characters in your deck. A lot of the once per game effects become really powerful when you only have to use one action to get them into play. But most importantly, the character decks can play something that I like to call the engine. The engine is Ginny Weasley and Seamus Finnigan. And what it allows you to get is a lot of cards and a lot of actions. So Ginny Weasley says before each of your turns, count the number of other characters you have in play. You may draw that many cards. So if you have a lot of characters in play, you can draw a lot of cards. And this quickly becomes quite ridiculous once you've had her in play for a while. And Seamus Finnigan allows you to once per turn discard two cards to get an action. So you're getting a lot of cards from Ginny, then Seamus can discard some of those cards that maybe you don't need for the moment, and you get an extra action. So essentially you'll be playing with more cards and more actions once you have this rolling, which is really powerful. 3 actions per turn and a lot more cards than your opponent means you have more options and you can also play more cards. Now, we can only play 4 copies of Seamus and Ginny. We would play more if we could, probably. But since we cannot, we are playing a character called the Fat Lady, which I also consider part of the engine because she's closely tied to it. Her power is that we can use an action to search our deck and take a Gryffindor character from our deck, show it to our opponent, and put it into our hand. So both Seamus and Ginny are Gryffindor characters. So if you are not so lucky and you don't find Ginny or Seamus, well, maybe you find the Fat Lady instead. And she can get those for you by just using some extra actions. So this card adds a lot of consistency to the main engine and makes it so you can very reliably get it on track. Now, if you're lucky, you will just draw Ginny and Seamus, and then you'll have an even faster start, but the Fat Lady ensures that you're not dead in the water. So this is what makes all character decks so powerful. You have a very consistent way to set up a very powerful engine. And because this engine is drawing us so many cards, we are seeing a lot more of our deck than a so-called normal deck would. And this means that we can play a win condition that requires a lot of different pieces to work. And that is exactly what we are doing in this deck. So we are using a very powerful combo, which is Dobby's Help and Venomous Tentacular Juice, and Grip Hook can also be used sometimes in this combination. So what do these cards actually do? Well, Dobby's Help, it forces our opponent to draw 10 cards. Venomous Tentacular Juice forces our opponent to draw twice as many cards as they have in their hand. And Grip Hook forces our opponent to discard their hand and draw as many cards as they discarded once per game. So you can use Dobby's Help to give your opponent a lot of cards in their hand. Then you can make them draw a huge amount of cards with Venomous Tentacular Juice. And this would be effectively your opponent losing 30 cards from their deck, just those 2 cards combined. but if you combine it with Grip Hook's effect after, then they have at least 30 cards in their hand and they will lose the game. Now, of course, this can be done in many different combinations. You could, for example, play 2 Dobby's Help and then a Venomous Tentacular Juice, and that would also kill your opponent. And perhaps your opponent already has some cards in their hand, and then it might be enough to just play 1 Dobby's Help and 1 Venomous Tentacular Juice. So there are a lot of ways to set up a kill with these cards, and that is really powerful. And since you have 3 actions, you can usually do it all in one turn. Grip Hook you can even put on the board before you do this to prepare for the big combo. These powerful spells that we are playing to finish the game off require a lot of power. Dobby's Help requires 10 power and a charm symbol, and Venomous Tentacular Juice requires 9 power and a potion symbol. In this deck, we are using a card called One Shop to try to get to a lot of power in an easy way. So what One Shop does is it doubles the power that all Charms Lessons provide. And as long as we don't play this and our opponent can make use of this, then it's a really, really good card. In a normal final board state for this deck, One Shop will provide as much as 4 power on its own. And this is because in order to get to the 10 power we need to play Dobby's Help and to also have a Potions Lessons in play, we need at least 4 Charms Lessons and a One Shop, and that is 8 power. Then some card that provides Potions power, like our 1 Potions Lesson or Professor Severus Snape. And then we need some final card to provide the 10th power. This means One Shop is a really, really efficient card. It's 4 times as good as one of your lesson cards. How you play the One Shop will depend a bit on the matchup. If you know they have no way to get rid of the card or no way to make use of its effect, then you may want to play it 1 turn before you try to kill your opponent. But if you're afraid that it's gonna get destroyed, then you can set up a board state where you finish the game on the same turn that you play it, so that your opponent never has a chance to discard it or to make use of its effect. For example, you could have a board where you already have Grip Hook and Seamus and the rest of the power that you need on the board. Then you could discard 2 cards with Seamus so that you have 3 actions. Then your first action will be playing One Shop. Your second action will be playing Dobby's Help. Your third playing Venom's Tentacular Juice. And now you can use Grip Hook to finish them off. The rest of the deck is pretty straightforward, but let's go over some of the card choices in the deck. So we of course we need some other characters to play, both to make use of Ginny's effect but also Ron's effect. If we're only paying 1 action to play our character cards, then of course we want to play a lot of them. So we are playing Professor Severus Snape, who can both provide the potions power that we need, but also once per game he can shuffle up to 7 cards from our discard pile into our deck. So he can heal us once per game. We also have Madame Pomfrey, which is purely a healing card. She can shuffle up to 12 cards back. So for just 1 action, you're healing yourself 12. And also remember that all the characters that we're putting on the board, even if we already use their once per game effect, Ginny Weasley will still draw extra cards because they are on the board. And we have Marcus Flint, who once per game can force our opponent to choose 3 cards from their hand and discard them, which is really nice way to sometimes disrupt our opponent to prevent them from messing with us. Then we have Argus Filch, who can use an action to discard an adventure from play, which is a really nice way to make yourself proof against some of the annoying adventures in the game, like escaping the Dursleys. Then we have Professor Quirina Squirrel, who can once per game return all creatures and items to their owner's hands. And this is a really powerful way to deal with creature decks. You can win so many actions by doing this. If they have 4 creatures in play, you're pushing them back 4 actions just by playing this card. So really worth it to play at least 1 copy of this guy. Then we have McGonagall, who both provides 1 power. We don't actually care about the transfiguration symbol, but the 1 power can be relevant. And once per game, she can discard an adventure our opponent has played. So really good value for 1 action to get both 1 power and the ability to get rid of an adventure without even spending an action. Then we have Hannah Abbott, who once per game can trade 2 cards in our hand for 2 non-healing cards in our discard pile. This is of course really nice because we're a combo deck, so if some of the combo pieces that we are playing got lost by getting sent to our discard pile, we can retrieve them so that we can do our powerful combo. Then we have Dean Thomas, who once per game lets us draw 3 cards. We have 1 copy of Draco Malfoy. He gives us the power to use an action and discard a card from our hand, to look at our opponent's hand and discard 1 card from theirs, which is really good if we're up against a deck that is trying to pull off some kind of combo or has some cards that are way more important than others in their hand. And of course a grip hook that I already explained is part of our kill combo plan. Another perk of playing all these characters with once per game effects is that we become very resilient against some otherwise good spell cards. Like for example, picking on Neville is a commonly played card that lets our opponent discard a card we have in play unless we discard 2 other cards we have in play. Well, if we have a bunch of character with once per game effects that we have already used, then we can just get rid of those. And it's even better because if we have played a card like Madame Pomfrey and used her effect, then discarding her can actually be a bonus because all characters are unique, so we couldn't play another Madame Pomfrey as long as she stays in play, but if she is discarded from play, then we can put another copy into play and heal us 12 damage once again. You may have noticed that we're playing a lot of situational cards in this deck, like for example Argus Filch that can only be used to deal with adventure cards, and Quirinus Quirrell that can only be used to deal with creatures and items. We can get away with this because we're drawing so many cards with a Ginny that we should still see the cards that are important for us to win the game. And if we draw cards that we don't need in a particular matchup, then we'll just discard them when using Seamus, who we will want to be using anyway. Now, there are some spells in the deck that further try to help the consistency and make use of the wide array of options that we have in the deck. So the first one of these is Chocolate Frogs. It only requires 1 power, and it allows us to search our deck and take a wizard or witch character from our deck and put it into our hand. So this is a way to get whatever a wizard or witch we need for a given situation into our hand. Early on, it could be if you didn't get Fat Lady or Ginny, you could get Ginny with this. Later on, it might be if you're facing a creature deck that you need to get Quirrell with this to deal with their creatures. The next spell is very similar. It's Entrancing Enchantments. The only difference is this costs 1 more power, and this can get any character card, which means it can also get Grip Hook and Argus Filch from our deck. 2 things that can be really important depending on the matchup. Then we have Gringotts Vault Key. This one requires 6 power, but it allows us to search our deck for any card. So if we're missing a combo piece or a very important character, this can be the thing that helps us get what we are searching for. Now the final card of the deck that I haven't talked about is we're playing 2 copies of Hover Charm. You might remember it from the Fred and George deck that was posted before this one. It simply returns one of our opponent's cards in play to their owner's hand. It's just a way for us to have an option to mess a little bit with our opponent, especially against other character decks. We can return Ginny to their hand. So that was the entire deck. I really enjoy the versatility of this kind of deck, how your deck is kind of a toolbox of different options, and how you can play these cool combos in a pretty consistent manner. The cool thing is this character deck archetype is extremely versatile and can play a lot of different win conditions. It doesn't have to be this Dobby's Help, a Venomous Tentacular Juice combo. You can play it in many different ways, and I intend to show many different character decks in the future. If you want to see this deck and other decks in action, then please stay tuned for the stream where I'll be doing Harry Potter TCG gameplay among other things. Thank you for watching.